Hi, I am your host, Michael Hinkson, and you are listening to Unstoppable Mindset. Today, we get to chat with Dwayne Keys, and Dwayne has an interesting story. One thing that really attracted me to Dwayne when we first started talking is he pointed out that he moved from the second smallest state in the union to the smallest state in the union. And I want to know more about that. So we'll have to deal with that and who knows what else. But Dwayne, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
I am so glad to be here with you as well, Michael. And I'm just looking forward to, speaking and, for your listeners to hear more about my experience and story.
Well, let's start then. We do have to get to how come you went from bigger to smaller, but tell us a little bit more about you growing up, sort of the early Dwayne, if you will.
Yeah, the early Dwayne. I was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware. I am, some of the facts that people don't know until they really get to know me. I am the younger of fraternal twins that was born. So I had a twin brother, Dwight, who had passed away when I was a year. We were both a year old. Mm-hmm. So, my family expanded where my mother had two other children, my younger sister, Laura, who is 2 years younger than me. And then 11 years later, my mother had another addition with my, other sister, Vivian. So in terms of growing up, that was my family unit in terms of what I knew. In terms of my father, I always say I can count the number of memories on one hand of my father, although he did live in the same city and he also had children as well, siblings that I really didn't, even today, don't really know, but knew of and were aware of.
So they were in Wilmington.
Yeah, we were all in Wilmington. My first few years were obviously living with my grandparents. My mother was a young single mother. In hindsight now, it's very easy to say and speak of that. I grew up in a low income household because my mother always was working full-time, also part-time. She was always supporting us in the family. And there are moments where I can reflect on that we were financially challenged, but yet I didn't know it growing up. You would have never known that, just how my mother was determined that we would have a comfortable living environment, and that we had what we need. But now knowing when I know, it's like, oh, we definitely were poor.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how parents keep that from children? And I can appreciate that and understand it because she didn't want you to worry about those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, kind of thinking about it, like I can remember there's moments where the electric got turned off or something that disconnected or there was a notice or something. But as she was very supportive of me reading. She was very direct on getting good grades. Anything with less than a C was unacceptable in the house. And then even if you got a C, that was still she always emphasized you can always do better. So she definitely had a very high expectation of me, not only of, doing well in school, staying out of trouble, but also just being more than the lived experience. So, questions about going to college. She was very big on, I see you going to college. I see you doing these things. I see you doing more than what we knew in terms of Wilmington, Delaware, more than what the life. And she would always emphasize that I don't want you to have to work two jobs. I don't want you to have to struggle like this. I want you to be able to have an excellent life, have a way of life where you can do work but get compensated for it. So it was always about, you go to school to get the good grades, to get the degree, so that you can get paid well and not have to struggle financially.
Yeah.
Like she did.
Did she say those things to you?
Yes, she did. At certain times, she was, as I gotten older, in particular, as I became a teenager, and then as I got to the point where I was able to work, she did emphasize that. So when I turned 16, a month after my 16th birthday, she got me a job working at one of the supermarkets that she had worked at as well at the time. That was her second job. And her statement to me was that you are going to now start paying bills in this house. You're going to contribute financially because you can. And what I didn't realize at that time, but what she was doing was instilling that sense of responsibility. So she didn't tell it to me at that time, but years later, she instilled that she was happy that she had made me go to work, because then the concept of me going out, earning a living, being able to support myself, that was instilled early on.
How about with your sisters? Did she do the same thing with them?
She actually did. So my younger sister, Laura, started actually working when she was, 15 years old, because, as there was extra money, I was able to have spending money, do some stuff. I was able to drive my mother's car because I had my license. And so I think my younger sister saw that and wanted some of that for herself, And so it was, well, if you want to have those things like Dwayne does, well, you should consider getting a job. You have to, my mother worded it like, all right, well, Dwayne's works. That's why he's able to get those things and have those things. And so the idea was, well, I should get a part-time job. And so she started working part-time during summers and also in school, time restricted, but she was able to find her own part-time job to work. And that has been the same thing also my younger sister Vivian with, getting employment. I would say when we want to accomplish a goal, when we want to do something, we find a way to do it. We just do. We may not have everything planned out or organized at that moment, but we are very determined people when it comes to accomplishing our goals and getting what we want. And so that sense of determination is in all of us. It just shows in different ways at times.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you're saying. I can't say that growing up, we had such a low income that we had electricity or anything turned off, but I know we weren't really rich by any standard. And we had an income that allowed us to sometimes drive to visit relatives and things like that, but we didn't have a lot of money. And when my parents finally passed, we certainly didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of money to give to my brother and me, but still, I think the same kind of ethic was in what they instilled in us, which was you got to work, you got to learn to make your own way. And I think, although they didn't say it, probably a little bit more for me than my brother. My parents were told when I was born, 4 months later, it was discovered I was blind, that I should be sent to a home for handicapped children because no blind child could ever grow up to amount to anything. And my parents said to the doctors, "You're wrong. He can grow up to do whatever he wants." And they really made sure that I grew up with that kind of an attitude. And I certainly have absolutely no regrets with them doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how parents have their plan. They don't always tell you or communicate their plan to you. And it's only until even more recently, I'm like, okay, now what she said made sense. Now what she did makes sense. I didn't understand it at times. And at times it was frustrating because it did feel like, oh God, she's controlling. Oh God, it's never good enough. But then in hindsight, I'm like, everything she had, it had a purpose that is now being fulfilled now that I can see.
Well, the other side of that is she may not have had such a well spelled out plan that she really understood all those things. It was just kind of the ethic that was in her.
Yeah, exactly. I agreed.
So you went off to school and you got a diploma and all that. Then did you go to college and what did you do there?
Yeah. So, after completing Brandywine High School, during my senior year of high school, I had been involved in some activities. One was DECA, that was the marketing club. And I had participated in the DECA State Conference in Delaware in February and had won second prize in one of these categories. And lo and behold, Johnson & Wales University was there at the conference, and they were handing out brochures. They were, talking about the university and how they offered their, programs in terms of marketing, and then how they had programs that specialized in advertising, promotion, and fashion and retail. And I'm like, this sounds exciting. Well, let me look at it. It's not going to hurt to apply. I was debating about when I stay in Delaware, when I go apply to University of Delaware, Delaware State. Do I stay? Do I go? What I found was appealing that Johnson & Wales' curriculum it was not the traditional school. And so it stood out to me that there was more focus. They called themselves back then America's Career University. So it was appealing to me because it wasn't like I'm just going to be stuck in where I've been hearing this nightmare about people in terms of just going to college and I have no life. It was more of like, wait a minute, we're going to prepare for you to get that job that you that so desire. So that was very appealing to me in terms of the university. It was also appealing to get out of Delaware. It just, I loved my hometown, but I felt that I was stifled there, and I didn't feel as though that I could be myself in terms of my ambition, my attitude, the things I aspire to. I saw Wilmington, Delaware. I mean, my mother would say it's kind of like a retirement state at times. And if you want to have an active social life, you would go to Philadelphia, which is like half an hour, 45 minutes away. And it was like, okay, here's your chance and opportunity to get away. So I did apply to the school. I did get accepted. What my mother did not know at the time, and I have since revealed, I took a secret trip to Providence during high school time, during swim break. During spring break, my mother took a trip down to Atlanta, and so she was during that year, seeing visiting Atlanta. My aunt, her sister had got married and moved down there. And my mother was being told, you got to come down to this city. You need to see this. You need to, experience life down here. My mother was falling in love with that city. And during the week when my sister stayed with my grandparents, I had made a day trip by train to Providence, Rhode Island from Wilmington, Delaware. When I came here, the mall had just opened up. They were having water fire. It just felt good. I liked the look and feel of Providence. I liked how I was like, yeah, I could be down with this spot. So I was comfortable with coming here, although I never told anyone about that. So most of my family had thought I was just coming to this place, not knowing what it was I was coming into, when in fact I had an idea of what I was going to be experiencing. And I had worked for most of that summer in between graduating from high school and getting ready for college. And then in August, the beginning of August, right before I was due to come to Providence, my mother made a decision. She was moving down to Atlanta. So she and my sisters moved down there first. I stayed with my grandparents temporarily, and then my grandparents took me to Providence, Rhode Island to move into the dorms.
So what did mom say when you finally told her about your secret trip?
I mean, she did not really get mad. I mean, now when she sees all the stuff that I've been doing and I've been involved in, I think she accepts it that it was divine intervention. It was supposed to happen. It was only revealed, like I said, within the last year or so. So, well, not much that could be done. But I think she now accepts that it was meant to be for me to be in Providence.
Hey, mom taught you some of these skills. Oh, yes, gosh.
Yes,
yeah. So that's still, it's a great story though. You did what you needed to do, which is certainly a good thing. So you went there, and I gather that you decided to study marketing.
Yes, I mean, my associates was in retail because I was looking at the different areas, the different pathways that Johnson Wales offered. And so the one that caught my eye, which is the one that I was very familiar with, was retail. And, the initial idea was, okay, you can learn about the aspects of running a retail store, of retail management. And then at the end of your 2 years, when you complete your associate's degree, you can decide if you want to continue on with retail for your bachelor's, if you want to change it up. And so I, just created that pathway. When I completed my associate's degree, I decided to move on to getting the bachelor's degree in marketing. I was like, I loved, at least at that time, I loved retail, but I was like, I didn't want to limit myself to just retail as my education. So let me expand it to generally marketing, because then I can transition to any other aspects of marketing if I so desired in the future.
And so you went off and you got your bachelor's in marketing.
Correct.
So when did you graduate with that?
I graduated my bachelor's degree in 2003 and my
Okay.
associate's in 2001.
All right. So they offered an associate's degree at Johnson Wells?
Correct. And I believe they still do. Again, it's been 20 something years, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure what has changed in the curriculum, but that was the pathway at the time.
Well, cool. So you did that, and did you go get any kind of advanced degree after the bachelor's, or did you just stop there?
No, I had decided to continue on with Johnson Wells for my graduate degree. At that time, there was this debate: do you get your master's degree or get an MBA now? I had took a long look at myself, and I was just saying, I don't want to have to come back to school later on. I did not. I, like many other people, thought, okay, college is done. I'm never going to have to do a studying again. Obviously, I've seen that not to be the case. I continue to study even in my career. But at that time, I was like, you know what makes sense? And it was like, I'd rather get that degree now, get it out of the way. You'll have it in your educational levels, and then you will focus on your professional experience, so that when the time comes and that is a preferred or required education level, I would have already had that in my possession. I didn't have to worry about going back studying, being in a position where I'm working full time, having a career, having kids with doing that. So my aspect was, you're still in study mode. You can still take the test easily. You still can do all those things. Go ahead and do it right now. And so I just continue on.
Yeah, I hear you. I decided when I got my bachelor's to continue on as well. I just thought that it was probably better to to get most of the schooling done, the formal schooling at least, done all at once. I never had the attitude that I wouldn't go off and continue to learn and do other things, but as far as formal college, I just did it all at once, and I enjoyed it and have no regrets about doing that.
Yes, yeah.
So when did you graduate with your or your master's?
I completed that and graduated in 2005.
Okay. And then what did you go do?
So, one of the things that's also amazing and interesting is that I had always been working full time for most of my college life. I think the first year, in my freshman year, I lived on campus. I did work study. I may have taken a job here and there. But the second year, I lived off campus, and I had lived off campus ever since. And the second year, my mother had a very honest conversation with me in which she was very clear: I can only pay your rent, help you with paying rent just for this year, your sophomore year, and then you are on your own. You're gonna have to find a way to pay for your bills. I did have some support from my grandparents, but living with my grandparents in between my school breaks was definitely a challenge. My grandparents were Pentecostal, who you describe as conservative, traditional in terms of their outlook on life. And in terms of how you should be living your life, but then also one of the things that I really had a challenge with them is this sense of control. And so anyone who knows me, I'm one in which I definitely am for making my own decisions, supporting you in what you want to do, regardless of how I may think about it. But I had came up against this experience that, because I was being supported financially, that also meant that I needed to do what they said. And that was everything from, if I even read a book, I remember reading this book on Islam. And it wasn't that I was thinking about converting. I just wanted to learn more about the religion, the culture, the people. And I can remember her seeing that book, looking at it with disdain, and wondering why I was looking at that. And I didn't need to bother myself with such things. And so it's that type of limitation that I have a problem with. And I was very determined that no one's not going to do that. But at that time, you're 18, 19 years old. You're trying to figure out this world. They are your grandparents. Be as respectful as you can. But to kind of sum it up, there were mounting building conflicts that had happened. And Christmas break in 2000, I had came down for a few days, and I was like, okay, I need to get back to Providence. I need to get my life in order. I need to get this job. I need to get things settled. And my grandfather wanted me to stay longer, and I originally thought we were going to take a trip down to Atlanta to see my mother and my sisters. That was the reason for me coming down. And when that didn't happen, I said, well, I need to get back up to Providence and get this all sorted out. And my grandfather, being upset about that, I had asked my grandmother for some money as she had promised, and she wrote a check to me. I want to say it was like $250, $300, and he said to me, that check right there, cherish it, because that's the last money you get in. Don't you ask for anything else ever again. And I said, okay. And he took me to the bus station, and I got on my bus back to Providence, Rhode Island, and had to just really work on what were my next steps. So between January and March, I struggled to find a job, and there were days where I didn't eat. There were days where I was behind on bills. There were days that I almost, if you was threatened with eviction. But I eventually got a full-time job working for one of the department stores, Nordstrom, and that was the pathway on working full-time. So really, ever since before, right around I turned to age 20, I've always worked full-time in my field. And so after doing these different jobs, working in retail, working for the school, working in the PR office, I decided that I needed to do something that was different. I needed to do a sales job, and lo and behold, I got my job as a financial advisor trainee with Morgan Stanley, and that began my pathway into financial services.
So were you doing Morgan Stanley while you were still in school?
Yes, I had gotten that job in April of 2004, at the end of my first year of grad school. And so in order to keep that job, you had to pass your Series 7 license. So my first 3 months were just studying for that exam, which I, had passed, incredibly passed, and was grateful, and then had to get additional licenses. But yes, while I was completing my grad school studies, I was doing studying for those licenses, and again, working full time and also taking classes in the evening.
Series 7 is not a trivial thing to get a license for.
And how, I can say that now, but when your job's on the line, because I was like, the incentive was there. Like, what we want to do? So now I was like, okay, I knew what I did with the practice exams and retaining information, absolutely. But at the time, that was really a major mental hurdle.
Oh yeah,
to overcome.
And that's my point. It isn't trivial to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, you did that. And when you got your master's, then what did you do? Were you working for Morgan Stanley then, or what?
I was still working for Morgan Stanley. You got to remember, this is 2004, 2005. So the mindset was, even if you're 20 something years old, or if, you need to meet sales goals, you need to bring in business. The culture, which is now what we would call toxic. Again, this was language and words you didn't know about it, but this is at that time, very cutthroat industry.
Mm-hmm.
And one in which I just was like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to thrive here. I'm not going to be able to meet these sales goals. So I went to another advisory firm called Strategic Point that was local nearby. I was there as an advisory associate for about a year. And then I was able to get a job in a call center with Bank of America. Bank of America had just bought Fleet, and they were converting all of Fleet Bank's departments into Bank of America. And so Fleet had owned Quick and Riley, and Quick and Riley was becoming Bank of America Investment Services. That's BA&C. And so I had gotten that job as an investment specialist. That's what they called us. And I was with them for almost 5 years. So I worked during the 2008, the 2006 market crash, the 2007, 2008,
Yeah.
financial crisis, and then that following Great Recession, which I say for Rhode Island, that recession actually never went away. It's still here in some shape or form.
So you were a B of A, what, about a year?
Actually, almost 5 years.
Almost five. Okay.
I was there as a investment specialist. I had been moved to the sales gates. I was, opening up accounts online. I did, what they call priority service associate or trading gate. So I did every type of securities trade for self-employment accounts that you could think about: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, options. I was on our platinum brokerage services, which was the high net worth trading gates. And then I was promoted to senior investment specialist or a team leader. So I was one step below being a team manager. And I also had to get the series 9 and the 10, which was the supervisor's licenses.
Right.
So I did do that for at least about, like I said, almost 5 years. When Bank of America bought Merrill Lynch, there was the conversion of the companies, and Merrill Lynch was coming in with its own, ways of how it ran business. And I think by that time I had gotten to a point where I was in the call center, and I was like, yeah, I think it's time to get back into being client facing, but not necessarily leaving the financial services world. But I also wasn't desiring becoming a financial advisor again like I had been before. And so I came across this role of what they call a licensed banker. So someone who works in a bank who just happens to have the investment licenses, that they can be a connection between the financial planners or financial consultants, but also still being a banker in a retail branch. And Sovereign Bank, we now know it as Santander, but back then it was still called Sovereign, was hiring for this licensed banker role in Pawtucket. And I had applied for that job and got accepted. And I was with them for, I would say, 2.5 years. Aspired to be an assistant manager, and Santander, when they took over for Sovereign, they took away the assistant manager role. So there was no way to build up to become an assistant manager or to become a branch manager. It was just, you need to meet your sales goals, just keep doing what you're doing, but no type of development, no type of mentoring. And again, that just wasn't going to do it for me. So another local bank, Baker RI, was hiring for an assistant manager. I applied for an interview for that role, got accepted, and was an assistant manager for 2 of their branches, and was there for almost 3 years. And then I got cursed back to coming back to Santander when they created the Premier Client Manager Group, which was a new department that was supposed to be a new way of remote banking, supporting clients remotely instead of in a branch. And that department was in place for 2 years. And in May of 2017, they announced that they were going to close that department. And as they did, I had evaluated what should I do, what was my next move. I was applying to other different roles at the bank and other different financial institutions, and wasn't getting any word back. And something said, why don't you check out some nonprofit jobs? I had always served on different nonprofit boards and was part of different, community events when it came to economic justice. And I was like, let me check those out. And I came across the job posting in Brown University Swear Center for our financial coach. And I'm just learning more about this nonprofit organization called Compass and their focus on families with low incomes and subsidized housing.
So what exactly does Compass do?
So Compass was basically providing financial coaching to families who were in what's called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, or FSS for short. And so that is a program that is a HUD program, which your housing provider, either like public housing authorities or private multifamily owners, can offer to residents who have a Section 8 voucher. And so Compass provides program management to those programs while also the financial coaching. And at that time, Compass was moving forward with one of the partners, POA, Preservation of Affordable Housing, on launching FSS in the FSS at 6 different locations in New England. And so this is the first time that FSS is being offered to multifamily properties. It had only been public housing authorities that could offer FSS. And just for people to know, what this program allows is that in the Family Self-Sufficiency program, a participant is able to save rent increases that happen as a result of increases in earned income. So when your earned income goes up, your rent goes up. But what happens is the difference between where your rent was when you first started the program versus where it is when you have increases in your earned income, that rent increase is put away in a savings account for you by the housing authority. And it's a 5-year plus program that a participant can be enrolled in.
So what do you do in your day-to-day job then with Compass? So you went to Compass in 2017 and you're still there, right?
I am still there. I mean,
6 years.
Yeah. So you can say, well, the role has evolved. Again, I joined as a financial coach and I've been a senior financial coach. So as a financial coach, I was working with one-on-one with clients in my portfolio, meeting with them. We had minimum required times that we're supposed to work with, but it's really supporting them in achieving their financial goals. And I describe how I look at financial coaching is we're in a car, the client is the driver, I'm in the passenger seat. I'm helping with navigation. I'm giving information on what could happen or what are you going to experience if you turn left, if you go right, if you go backwards, if you go forwards, with the mindset that we're supporting the client and them making their own decision as to where they want to go on this financial journey. And the emphasis is on asset building, like, people to move from being asset poor to asset secure. In our public benefit system, you always hear about an emphasis on income, and income is important. Yet we do know that having assets, having savings for emergencies, to be able to buy, down payment on the home, to be able to have an asset such as owning your own business, owning your own home, having money for retirement, just emergency savings. We know that this is key to families and to people's, success. And so I had started off again working directly with families one-on-one. And as a senior coach, I worked on other special projects and supporting Compass's mission. The last 3 years, I was a coaching manager. I was leading a team of up to four financial coaches who were making sure they were providing that high quality financial coaching that I did as a coach, and which I was still doing. And then more recently, I was promoted to director of programs for our multifamily partnership. So I now oversee the team of coaching managers, program managers who are overseeing coaches and outreach specialists. So they're making sure they're having effective program management, getting high quality financial coaching. And I'm working with 6 different multifamily partners on strategies for expanding FSS, scaling the FSS program.
So how does Compass make money? I mean, do they get it from funding? Do they get it from the investments that you help people acquire, or what?
Okay, so essentially our combination is obviously philanthropy. We do a number of fundraising, but foundations definitely do help. We do get paid for running these programs for the housing partners, so that's the additional source of income as well.
Is that a federally funded program?
So the federal funding, yes, it is. So more recently, it used to be that only public housing authorities could get HUD funding to fund these positions to fund the work of FSS. Now, multifamily owners can do so depending upon if you receive an award from HUD. So there is some federal funding involved. You also may get the housing provider that we work with gets their own sources of funding that they used to pay Compass with. And then, but the bulk of our money that we do is philanthropic.
Okay. It seems to me, and I have to go look, I know we've had somebody else from Compass elsewhere on Unstoppable Mindset, but it's been a long time, so I'm going to have to go back and look. But I know it was fascinating to hear what Compass did and what all you guys are doing. So for you, though, having heard about your upbringing and so on, and heard about how your life has evolved over time, what would you say your passion and areas of focus in your life is or are?
So the role is where I'm really fulfilling is how do we help families rise up out of poverty? and I said this at one a panel discussion a few weeks ago, which was what is that world with no poverty, where people are not having to rely on this mindset of just pull yourself off from your bootstraps. But wait a minute, we're really giving people the financial education that they need. And I say that financial education, not financial literacy, because I can't stand someone thinking,
Mm-hmm.
that word of financial literacy. People are literate. They just may not have the education that you have in terms of this area of personal finance, but also having the assets, the cash, the capital to do what it is that you need to do is very significant. I appreciate when I see some of my client experiences in the last, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, like that first year of the pandemic. I had two clients who were able to buy their house. So even in the issue of this scary situation of COVID, of this uncertainty with the economics of what was happening with our country and all that was going on, I still had clients who were able to persevere, who were able to move forward and achieve their goals of home ownership, or other goals of just having the money to be able to survive an emergency. And it was also a unique time because some of my clients had to then pivot when they had lost their jobs temporarily. They used that time to think about, should I go back to school? Should I, focus on being self-employed? What does that look like in terms of starting my own business? So it definitely opened up opportunities for people to be creative. How do we still thrive and be able to accomplish our next steps and our goals in spite of all the uncertainty that we still face today. But for me, as I always said, is who better to help you, support you in navigating through these financial systems and the experiences than someone who grew up with it and who also experienced it themselves. I kind of joke here and there, but I was like, who better to help you with a debt collection than someone who had a debt collection and who had to endure that experience and go through it.
Yeah. You were very fortunate that you had a mother who helped you through it by requiring you to do the things that you did. And you also have obviously had to discover some things on your own as well, but you did that, which gives you the skills now to do what you're doing, which is teaching others.
Yes, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yep.
All right, go ahead.
And I was going to say, even at Compass, there's been a lot more that I've had to learn, because even though that's what we do, my current role, I've had to learn project management, program management, what does it mean to run a nonprofit? So there's been quite an education I've continued to receive even there in terms of that arena, while at the same time, following up with just making sure that we're providing the high quality financial coaching.
So you work with people who are probably coming to you with a lot of fear and uncertainty in their lives, right?
Correct.
How do you help them overcome fear? What do you do to help them overcome fear and not be so daunted, if you will, or blinded by having all this fear in their lives because of all the things that have happened to them?
Yeah. I mean, one of the initial steps with all of our training is you have to build trust with the clients. And it's very hard because you have to remember they've experienced systems and organizations and peoples in the past who may not have treated them well, or they may have not had a best experience. So really building that trust is key. The next step is understanding their journey, their story, what have they done, and also celebrating successes that they've achieved on their own, because we never want to disconnect or dismiss what someone has achieved. But it's also then having to get back to what is it that you want to accomplish and what do you want to do? And again, we're going to go at your pace. So I've had some clients that they come in, I know they want to buy their house. They know what they need to do. They know what they need to work on. Great. We're going to go with you on that. And then I've had some clients who have said, you know what? I actually don't know what I want to do if I want to start. I've heard them say, I want to start my own business, but I don't know what that is. Okay, well then we're going to go on this pathway and on at this pace so that we can focus on that. And again, we're going to be flexible and adaptable. So if right now there's a goal that you'll be focusing on, but then something else happens, you got to prioritize that other thing, then we prioritize that other thing. I always say is that this is your journey. This is your financial coaching. This is not my during, my appointment, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do. You set the tone of where we're going to focus on, and I'm here to make sure you have the information, the resources, and the support that you need to receive in this program. And I think one of the main key things I have been able to do is help people recognize their own successes. People may be just doing things because they needed to do it. Or they may experience a situation where they think it's a failure, when actuality it's a success. And one of the things which may seem so minor, but I think it's major, is clients work on building up an emergency fund. Then they put away their savings, they reach that goal, and the next thing, an emergency happens, and then they have to use that money. And they're saying, I'm so depressed because, this happened with the car, this happened with this thing, I had to use that. And I'm like, great. Because that's what an emergency fund is for. That was exactly, I said, think about it. By you having that money, you didn't have to worry about using credit cards, using credit, using any type of predatory lending. You didn't have to borrow. You didn't have to do any of the things that would have gave you additional stress. You had the money right there. That's excellent. That's a goal that was accomplished. You accomplished your goal. So just thinking about those things, about stuff which people may feel as though, that's not really a major accomplishment. And it actually is, when you think about how you're trying to achieve financial security and success in your life.
Trying to bring some perspective back to people, because they really don't necessarily see what really happened. I mean, you guided them, they did stuff, but until something happens that causes them, for example, to use that emergency fund, and then you have to remind them of what that means, then and only then do they really internalize what happened.
Yeah.
If you had to really give us one story that was just a great success story, what would it be?
One story was one of my clients, who ended up, she had saved, I'm going to say, up to $30,000 in the program. But even up to that moment where she was completing the program, she still had doubt about if she was going to get that money. And she had been, increasing her income, had been saving, but her budget was becoming very challenged with affording both the rent increase and the other bills, because she also had a car payment. And she had gotten this car loan in order to be able to get to work, but it was causing this great challenge in her budget. And so we just asked the question. It was like, you're struggling with this payment, you're struggling with being able to meet other obligations. Would it make sense to take some of that money that you've already saved, pay off that car loan, and then by doing that, that helps you gain, you'll be able to meet all the obligations in your budget. You're able to save on your own. You won't have to worry about that item being on your credit, being an obligation anymore. You own it outright. You could even maybe adjust your insurance rate so you have to worry about full coverage and save some money that way. What about that? And she was like, you know what, let's do that. And we had put the request in. The check arrived 2 weeks later. And even when she's coming there, she's looking with the tears are running up her eyes, because she's like, she said, I can't believe this is really happening. Because you hear about it, you talk about it, you say this is going to happen. For her to actually see that that's happening, we're going to do that right now. And that's one, it was one less thing she had to worry about. It was like, think about all the stuff she's now going to be able to do. Mm-hmm. Now that goal, being able to pay off that debt entirely, not have to worry about that, and have a car in her own right that she owns, was the phenomenal. So I always talk about, like, even to that moment, to see that, this is really, I'm really going to accomplish this goal. This is really going to happen. I'm really going to be able to say that I did this. That memory still stays in my mind, just with the reaction of, the up until that very moment of the check being placed in your hand, there was this disbelief that this is really the real true program that actually exists and helps people.
Yeah. And they wouldn't have had access to those resources in any other way if you weren't there to advise them.
Correct. Exactly.
Well, you've been doing this now for quite a while. What do you see yourself doing in 5 years?
So, interesting enough is as we've been talking about what is the next pathway, and I have put that out there. I said I do see myself as an executive at Compass. We have different levels. We have all staff, obviously individual contributor, manager level, director level, which I'm at now. And I did say, I said I can see myself as an executive. And I look at my own pathway. I'm like, things get changed. Compass has expanded. When I first started, the organization was 25 people. We're now at above 70. So, there's growth in the company. Where I also see myself is that, as I said to you, I've always done this volunteer work in terms of advocacy, special events, work, doing things with different nonprofits. And I've come to be a specialist when it came to like community engagement strategies when it comes to people of color, particularly in this part of Providence, just being a special advisor, facilitating meetings. And what I've done is I've been able to wrap up all those other special projects and what I've done in terms of workshops and teaching and things outside of Compass into my own sole proprietorship D-Key solution, which I've had in place since 2015. But really this past year was really one in which I've done a number of projects. So just being like a business coach and a workshop instructor to participants who are looking to design, set up their own design business and supporting them in terms of business development and how do you set up a business bank account and how do you set up your own business to be able to, launch as a business entity. That's been fulfilling, but a number of other projects I've been doing. And then obviously I aspire to hold elected office. I did run for state rep in 2018. And I will be pursuing running for our local city council races in 2026.
Wow. Not till 2026, huh?
Every 4 years. So my council person just ran and won her third term in 2022, but she's term limited. But more importantly, I've been supporting her ever since she first ran in 2014. Definitely have been a great admirer of the work that she's done with our area, and in a way, I want to be able to continue what she had started in her term. So it's been something we've been openly discussing, but I've been very firm that yes, I am running in 2026. I do have my campaign account open. I do have things are in place. And as we get closer to that date, more to come.
Well, I would only say the other side of that is that at least if her term limits are causing her not to be able to run, then you won't be able to run against her, which is a good thing.
Correct.
Good to have friends,
Yeah. I mean, people have asked that question, why didn't you run? And I said, no. I made it very clear that I do support our incumbent. I definitely do admire her work and what she's done. And so, no, I was not going to challenge her. But I said, the moment she said that she was done, I'm running.
Well, that's fair in a lot of ways. So what issues are there in your surrounding community? And I guess I would say overall, for all of us, that we need to be a little bit more aware of, things that you want listeners to know about that they ought to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, and this is also reflecting that up in the last 7.5 years, I was the chairperson of the South Providence Neighborhood Association. So that was a nonprofit that was launched in 2015 when the council person had just gotten in office, and there was this desire for us to have a group, a body, a place to come where we can get information and talk as a community, neighbors, what was going on in the neighborhood, what's impacting us, and how do we move forward. In this experience, I would say there's a number of things that are going on. One has to deal with zoning and urban planning issues. With Providence, we have huge issues when it comes to housing design. We have a situation where I have to say this, I've used these words. We still have segregation and redlining practices embedded in how we have housing development, housing projects that are being done. We definitely have this issue of housing affordability, which is across the nation. But, here in Providence, we have displacement that's happening where a lot of residents, low to moderate income, primarily Black and brown residents, have had to move out or move elsewhere. and because they have been able to afford the high cost of prices, they're not able to, the wages are not keeping up with the prices of inflation and the housing costs. And plus, in Providence, unlike some other cities where they require housing developments to include units, include price points for low to moderate income, in Providence, we're okay with people doing high luxury housing. One development just be high luxury development, no other subsidies. So it's also creating these divisions, in my view, where we're not providing opportunity for families, individuals, those from different parts of life to be living in all parts of Providence. It's almost as if, oh, this price point, you only have this type of housing in this one part of the city or that part of the city. And it's perpetuating that. Another thing has to also deal with the issue of taxation. Providence, we are a college town, but literally half of our properties are either owned by colleges and universities or by governments because we are the capital city of Rhode Island. So we've definitely had financial issues when it's come to our pensions, when it comes to our viability. There was this huge major issue between what we call the pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, with the universities, colleges, universities. Many residents didn't think that the universities were paying more than they should. And we do have a big hospital community in my part of the neighborhood in which there's been debates about that community not paying their share, and also fears that hospital community will take more land in the neighborhood for their buildings, their parking lots. So there's a history of how through urban renewal, eminent domain, homes were bought and people had to move out of the neighborhood for the expansion of the hospital community. And you have many residents who will still talk about that today.
What about any kinds of issues that you might be seeing or encountering regarding persons with disabilities, which is, usually a large minority that people don't talk about?
So one of the things that has already come up in terms of the city, where I already said, I'm like, we are not ADA compliant when it comes to our sidewalks, when it comes to people with wheelchairs. A major issue that happens, and this is what we're talking about, think about something as simple as shoveling the sidewalks during the wintertime. And what I've seen, you've had people, but in particular those people who have mobility issues, having to walk in the street because that person or that company, that organization did not shovel the sidewalk. So we have a public safety issue with just everyone, but I find with people with disabilities, for those who have a mobility issue, that is a major crisis that is going on. And then the main thing also with Rhode Island, particularly in Providence, we have old housing stock. So there's a number of people who may, again, because of mobility issues, they can't get to the second or third floor. So they're limited with housing. So we have a number of people, and actually one of my good friends and colleagues, Tina Pedersen, she's someone who has mobility issues. She was speaking about this, there's housing, there's units, there's places that she can't go because it's not accessible.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that I definitely see here that you don't think about until it's time to have the activity or until it's time to do something, and that person can't get in. And she made up a good point. She was like, I bet you the majority of the folks, if you were to have an event or something at your house, would I be able to come to your house? And I'm like, nope, because I'm on the third floor, no elevator, no other way for you to get up to the third and get to me. So yeah.
How do you deal with that?
So, I mean, one of the things we have to do is, when we talk about infrastructure, we have to invest in how do we upgrade or design the housing in a way that is accessible for people to be able to get into the dwellings. And then you also have to deal with this practice of preservation and look and feel and character, because we are an old historic New England town. Absolutely. And we do have nice, gorgeous Victorian houses and everything else. And at the same time, we have this housing crisis. People need to use that space. How do you balance look and feel and character and uniqueness with this need of mobility, of access?
Well, to go another direction, though, which in some senses ought to be a whole lot easier to address, is what about things like, are the city websites accessible? What is the city doing to make information readily available, website accessibility across the board, and so on?
Michael, the website accessibility is not even accessible to those who can see. So we have a whole issue.
Good
with
political answer. No information really works.
I mean, so you got people who struggle to just get information in general from the city at times. And so so you bring up a very good point. It's not even at the forefront, not because it's not important. It's more of like, we're just struggling to get the basics of everyone just know what's going on, period.
One of the things that I talk about from time to time in speeches that I give, as well as I've mentioned a few times on this podcast, is when people talk about diversity, they never really talk about disabilities because we're not part of the conversation. We're not part of the discussion. And that's what really needs to change. And until people recognize that diversity, if it's going to truly be diversity, needs to include everyone, then that's not going to change. And so I oftentimes have discussions with people about inclusion as opposed to diversity, because they say, well, we're working on being inclusive, but you're not inclusive. Well, but we're partially inclusive. Nope, doesn't work. You either are inclusive or you're not. And if you're inclusive, it's a mindset. And if you are inclusive, then you're going to be dealing with disabilities and so on. It's unfortunate that we're not there yet. As I said, we don't really make disabilities part of the conversation. But I know what you're saying about housing and so on. You know, my wife used to watch, when she was alive, a lot of the shows on house building and all the people who'd come and renovate homes and all that sort of stuff. They would not invariably do anything to think far enough ahead that if somebody had a house and they were renovating it, that they might make it accessible for the next person who might buy that house. And so none of the people that really deal with all the house stuff on TV deal with it either. The only time it ever comes up is if you happen to have somebody in a wheelchair or whatever. It is unfortunate. We're not part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that goes into this other piece too, is equity when it comes to design and decision making. So when we're making the decision of what gets done and how it gets done, do we have everybody who needs to be included, not just in that conversation, but agreeing that this is the way that this is going to go? And that is lacking in many particular cases. I see it both not just in terms of accessibility, but even with those who have a disability who are also receiving public benefits, SSDI or SSI in some cases. Mm-hmm. And I have seen that where there's limitations when it's time to transition for them being able to go back to work and be able to earn a living. You see that limitation there in terms of you're limited to how many hours, how many hours, how much you can earn in a particular time period. Yeah. If you can lose this benefit, you lose that benefit. And so that was one of the things, to your point, when I first came to Compass, we had always, up to that point, had worked with more public housing authority clients who almost all of them, very rare that you came across someone who had a disability who was receiving one of those benefits. And when I came into, Compass, I encountered a number of people who enrolled who had SSI, SSDI benefits, particularly SSI, who wanted to go back to work, but they had all these limitations and barriers as to how they could save, how they could earn. And lo and behold, even at Compass, I'm like, well, what do we do? And we had nothing in place. So I had to use my first 2 years of really just like researching, developing content and information for us to put in place to support those clients. So even to your point, it wasn't intentional, but that had never been considered at Compass until it presented itself.
We still do not recognize that inclusion should be part of the cost of doing business and part of the cost of life, which is really the issue. But yeah, you're right. There are so many limitations on people who are receiving benefits like SSI and SSDI. There's only so much that can be done, and Congress isn't really willing to change that. So it is unfortunate that it continues to happen.
Yeah, I mean, even one of the blessings was the ABLE account, that was great. Yeah. But you have to be age 20. Your disability had to have occurred on or before your 26th birthday.
Right.
I'm like, okay, so what happens if I'm 30 something years old and it's something? Oh, I can't use that. So still is excluding a segment of population who could benefit from that program too.
There's a lot of that. Oh, it's a very unfortunate situation, and we're not anywhere near dealing with any of that yet. Well, you also have your own little enterprise outside of Compass, right?
Yeah, so DKey Solution, as I said, I've been doing a number of particular projects. I don't have any like formal business model, but in the past, I've been asked to facilitate a meeting or lead a workshop or do this one-on-one, business coaching. So there's a number of areas that I have outside of Compass that I've worked on. Like I said, a lot of stuff in terms of just my expertise with planning, zoning, community engagement, just things, supporting Black and brown business owners in terms of moving forward. And it was like, well, why don't you start, maybe doing that as a business? So lo and behold, this past year, like I said, there's always every once in a while I would have a project where I was asked to do something, and piece, some money, but nothing significant. This year, I had been signed up for a number of activities, as I said, like being a workshop instructor, business coach, doing consistent, activities, and I was like, oh, this is going to be different in terms of the type of income. This is not going to be something I should file. Like I should not. I should treat this as a business income that it is. And I had DKey Solution already set up, and I was like, okay, why don't you make this a regular thing? Why don't you put this out there that you do these activities at a price? And so that has been a whirlwind where I've completed a Catalyst Fellowship program, which is a paid fellowship program to learn how to be a nonprofit consultant. There's been other particular things that I've done in terms of just like, there's one project we're doing is called Broad Street Stories, and I'm a community connector with supporting how you do the engagement strategies with the community. Again, all paid work, things that I've done for volunteer basis, but getting compensated for the expertise in that arena.
So you haven't written any books or anything yet, have you?
I have not written any
Oh,
books.
you got to get to work.
In some stuff, but no, Michael, it's been so busy just trying to get all these activities, just to sit down and be like, well, I need to write this all down. That has definitely been a challenge.
Well, you have a lot of life experiences, though, that I think would make a great story, a great book that something to think about in the future. And when you do, you got to let us know so we can help promote it.
Absolutely, definitely will do.
Well, Dwayne, I want to really thank you for being here with us today. This has been a lot of fun. I really love your insights and the things that you've had to say. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about maybe DKey Solutions or just talk with you, how can they do that?
I would say the primary way is my LinkedIn. Dwayne Keys. You never really see my face down there.
Can you spell that?
So Dwayne, DWAYNE, KEYS.
So we can, as we did, find you on LinkedIn, and other people can do that, and are probably the best way to reach out to you.
Yes, I would say LinkedIn is the primary resource. Obviously, people can get in touch with me in terms of that primary vehicle. I am active on social media, so some people also access me through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on those stuff. So I'm not on Snapchat or TikTok, but I am on Facebook definitely.
Cool. Well, Dwayne, thanks for being here, and I want to thank you all for listening to us today. This has been fun, and I think it's been educational. It's really neat to hear how somebody is really working to help make a social difference, and you can't do much better than that. So we really appreciate you being here, and I want to thank you all again for listening to us. Reach out to Dwayne. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you if you've got any thoughts. You can reach me at Michael H.I., MICHAELHI, at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. You can reach our podcast page at www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is MICHAELHINGSON. So michaelhingson.com/podcast. Please, wherever you're listening, give us a 5-star rating. By the way, if you're looking for a speaker to come and talk about trust and teamwork, and of course, my September 11th story, if you know of anybody who needs a speaker to come and motivate or educate, talk about inclusion and so on, reach out to me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. Love to talk with you about coming to speak. And again, love those 5-star ratings. So thank you for those. And we'll thank you in advance for doing that. But Dwayne, one last time, I want to really thank you for being here and for giving us your valuable time. And now we should probably let you go eat dinner.
Thank you so very much. Yes, I need my strength for all this work that we gotta get done.
There you go. Well, really, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.